Have time, we will take your questions and provide answers through our blog. It is now my pleasure to introduce and welcome Melissa Carvalho. Melissa is the Director of Advocacy for Western Canada at Global Public Affairs. Throughout her 15 years of experience, she has provided leadership in strategic engagement, advocacy support, and issues management. Her role within both the Alberta and British Columbia Public Service and support on various government relations projects at Global Public Affairs, including significant policy developments and stakeholder engagement, have contributed to her approach to government relations and advocacy. Melissa's commitment to client service ensures priorities are woven into all aspects of the strategic engagement plans, bringing them closer to achieving their advocacy goals. Drawing on her experience in education, social services, and the not-for-profit can bring a unique perspective to her approach. Additionally, Melissa is active in her community, supporting various patient advocacy groups, sports teams, and restorative justice. Melissa holds a Bachelor of Arts in Social Services from the University of Victoria. Melissa, welcome.
Excellent. Thanks very much. I will remember to shorten that biography next time. Welcome, everybody, and I hope you are buckled in to have a conversation about stakeholder engagement. And as you want to mention, please don't hold back on your questions. So we will jump right through to our team. So you'll see on the screen here myself and also my colleague Shami. And so Shami isn't here today, but she has been very influential in the work that we've been doing. So she's tuning in the background and will take notes and be prepared for any follow-up questions that we need to provide. And for our agenda, this is what we plan to be talking about today. We'll provide an update on the current status of CPHR's self-regulation efforts, a political landscape overview and timeline, advocacy efforts and opportunities beyond self-regulation, including membership involvement opportunities, and finally, as I mentioned, a chance for questions. This is a brief overview of the overarching strategy that we've been working through. Phase 1 and 2 have included gathering, monitoring, and planning. And while this included direct outreach to government officials, both political and from the department, the focus was on how to tailor the approach to government's priorities. And of course, in that time, there was an election that provided both opportunities and challenges to engagement. Opportunity in the sense of candidates were open to conversations, but challenges in that it created some delays as government needed to be elected and then assigned portfolios. And of course, time to get up to speed on their mandated priorities. Phase 3, which is where we're at right now, can be referred to as a full court press. CPHR has its house in order as it relates to the application for self-regulation. At this time, we're ensuring government is clear on the value that this would provide to them, the workforce, and Alberta more broadly. In phase 4, we've been advised there will be consultation on amendments to the overarching legislation that will allow for CPHR's application to be reviewed. We're preparing to have CPHR's perspectives included, but also ready for its passage so the application can be reviewed. So on the surface, we've basically, in those 4 phases, I've started to articulate the overarching advocacy cycle that we walk through whenever we want to influence decision makers. On the next slide, this really just provides an illustration of the stops that we've made on the journey, which I just articulated, and gets into a little bit more of the details of who specifically we've been talking to. So when we go through this process, we think about where all of the government decision makers are, which portfolios do they hold. So in this case, it was at one point advanced education, sometimes job, economy, and trade. We've also then considered the roles of individuals outside of direct portfolios. So we know for a fact that the Minister of Arts, Culture, and Status of Women actually practiced human resources. So that's another voice around the cabinet table that we could be connecting to and ensuring that she understands the work that we're doing. Formal consultation is noted there on the right. And then regulation, which is what we're looking for to come into place so that we can have the application assessed. Next up is the political overview. So now that we've entered the political landscape portion of our agenda, the intent is to provide some context that illustrates the pivots that we've needed to consider in our strategy. It also provides a better understanding of the context within which government is making the decisions itself. So at the top here, you have federal and provincial dynamics that are playing out on issues like housing, climate resilience, but also immigration. So the federal minister of immigration is meeting with provincial and territorial ministers today to discuss immigration and ensuring that those entering the country, whether be it for post-secondary education or into the workforce, align with the needs Alberta's workforce requires. So in that way, we're seeing this in the education strategy, looking to recruit and retain individuals into the workforce. Similarly, healthcare refocusing seems separate from CPHR on the surface, but the organizational changes that are required will require significant HR support. Beyond recruitment and retention, there are significant considerations that need to be given on various aspects, such as moving employees from one organization to another, like AHS, for example, where folks might be moving into the new Recovery Alberta institution. This is not just hiring and firing that HR is known for, but rather the broader system implications, consideration for legal barriers or obstacles that need to be considered. This is how we demonstrate to government that CPHR is a valuable skill set that needs to be considered. Similarly, transportation and skilled trades are a focus from upskilling and reskilling perspective, which is easier said than done. Transitioning individuals into different sectors comes down to more than job postings and onboarding. Retention requires a skilled hand of a professional human resource workforce. So again, while the focus of government isn't specifically on human resource impacts here, I wanted to specifically note alignment to help illustrate that these topics could be seen as taking attention away from what CPHR is trying to accomplish, but actually it just provides opportunities for members to be continually illustrating and educating decision makers about how human resources can be critical for their success. Politically speaking, we've noted here two significant milestones at the bottom of this slide. And this will significantly set the tenor for years ahead, as the NDP will have a new leader elected on June 22nd. And the UCP's leader, and our Premier Danielle Smith, will have her regularly scheduled leadership review by her own party this fall. These elements will affect who we're talking to and when, so we want to keep it on everyone's radar. Here's a quick overview of the political timeline, just to show how the time will pass quickly. And yes, the Calgary Stampede is a real milestone on this calendar, because when we're talking about advocacy, we're talking about engagement. And the Calgary Stampede is a major opportunity for organizations and individuals to have informal conversations with MLAs of both political stripes. And the intent here is to socialize ideas, requests, and it provides opportunities for these decision makers to hear from individuals in an informal setting. Otherwise, other things you see on this timeline is the spring legislative session. So that's set to end at the end of this month, and all signs point to the fact that they will take the full month to get through what they need to. And after that, it's what we colloquially call the barbecue circuit, which we're going to get into further down the line in our slides. And then at the end is that fall legislative session where we're expecting some of those pieces to come through, including the Professional Governance Act, which is what we need to pass before CPHR can have their self-regulation application reviewed. So what's next? As we continue the theme of looking forward, here's what's on the horizon. We want to continue to demonstrate CPHR as a critical stakeholder by raising awareness of the organization and the value of its members, and a move towards a roundtable. So this roundtable is meant to provide an opportunity of when government is developing policy, HR is a role within so many organizations across so many sectors. So how can CPHR bring together some of those members to help influence government and their understanding? We also want to demonstrate that CPHR is a critical stakeholder. Similar to what we discussed on the political landscape, we'll continually be bringing attention to how CPHR as an organization can support improved policies to support the province in augmenting its labor workforce. This means building more relationships and identifying influential champions of CPHR's regulation application so that all of those individuals can also carry water to government on CPHR's behalf. And lastly, growing the number of voices who carry that message forward, which is what we're going to cover next, and how to advocate, and specifically how you can advocate. So this advocacy cycle that we've noted here is a staple of ours, and it shows how the advocacy cycle we adhere to. So I sort of walked through it on the very first slide, but I'm going to get into the brass tacks and the foundations that we build CPHR strategy around. CPHR has gone through this full cycle a few times now, sometimes moving backwards between various phases and tweaking messaging, for example, based on something that we learn. At this stage, we're raising the bar. So we are taking our engagement to new levels by sharing our approach with you, the membership, more broadly, and how you can assist to bring this one over the line. You can Google advocacy planning and get a pretty consistent list of questions, very similar to addressing any planning process. At the top here, we're going to identify issue and goal that we're trying to achieve. And we always say that you should have no more than 1 or 2 key goals. And as we move down, we're looking at information gathering and identifying opportunities for engagement. So this is where we do the work of finding where CPHR's priorities align with government's. Then we tailor our messaging to reflect language that government is using and understands. We identify opportunities for coalitions and is it better to come forward as a group, or what organizations carry more weight? So for example, if you work for or within a big organization that highlights the importance of HR, if that brand, if the organization that you work for would come forward and say how important professional human resources is, that helps CPHR's goal. Next up is outreach. And so that's engaging with key decision makers and influencers directly and letting them know about what it is that we're trying to achieve through HR and through CPHR as an organization. And we want to make sure that in all of these steps, there is the ability to go back, which we're going to get into in the next little slide, which is where members fit and what you can be doing. It's that exact same cycle that you saw on the previous slide, but here's that green box. And so that is where we see members on the front lines. So you are able to further highlight how being a certified HR professional is critical to your success in the workforce, but also the organization that you work for. When we talk about outreach at the highest level, here we mean your MLA. In this context, because we're seeking to influence government. And it may seem that these folks are unreachable, but actually the next few months are that summer barbecue circuit. They'll be out in their constituencies, they'll be out at various events, talking to constituents, wanting to learn about what is working and what isn't. And if you find yourself at an event where your local MLA is, we want to make sure that you're prepared to make an impact. Specifically, we want them to hear from you and help them understand how the value of CPHR. So you're raising awareness for what CPHR stands for, even just the acronym, and the value of a certified human resource professional. 1,000 form letters written to a minister's office typically counts as 1 letter. 25 people telling their MLA the value of CPHR will have 25 times the impact. It's sheer volume of voices coming from different sectors, but with the same message. It's invaluable. So we want to offer up, so what we also want you to be talking about is that round table model that I mentioned. So what this means is you can ask an MLA, what's a challenge that government is facing? Because CPHR can help to bring together various individuals from given sector and talk about workforce challenges, implications, and potential policy or program-based solutions. I know this seems overwhelming or awkward to some, but this is the job of MLAs, to talk to and learn from their constituents and to make a difference. In fact, don't be surprised if the MLA asks you, how can I help you? Or what can government do for you? And you need to be prepared, which is why we recommend a 30-second pitch, which will allow you to touch on these aspects unique to you, but carrying the same overarching message that every member will include. Board members also specifically can lean into their roles in informal networking opportunities and identify further challenge, sort of waving the more official CPHR flag. The next slide kind of gets into that 30-second pitch that I'm talking about. So it is telling your story. On the next slide, it will say advocating for your profession and telling your story. Here, we have highlighted at the top, people remember what they understand and how they feel, which is why we're continually looking for alignment and how HR elements and perspectives support government's objectives. If they can see themselves in what you're describing, they'll more easily understand it. So this slide walks through the elements that we touched on. I think, so it talks about outlining the issue. And my screen just froze, but that's okay. It's going to talk about outlining the issue that you're there to talk to them about, which is human resources. And you're going to use a specific example in your story that explains human resources in action. You're going to create that emotional connection. So make sure you touch on who you are, the organization you represent, and the issue of most importance, how it relates to government priorities and how you as a professional are supporting and achieving those priorities. I also just want to get into the details of when I say align with government's priorities, I don't mean that you are seeking to help them achieve exactly what they want to do and how they want to do it. We just know that they want to improve the labor workforce, and so we have ideas. It might not be the exact idea that they're out there talking about, but they don't know what they don't know. And so we're going to use some of the same language in alignment to help demonstrate that we can help get them there, potentially in a different way. On the next slide is effective engagement do's and don'ts. Do's on the left side are best practices, but in the case of a barbecue circuit, being punctual is less important as folks are coming and going. Prepare. So you need to know what you're going to say and research the candidate's background. You need to know who your MLA is. And to do that, you can check the Legislative Assembly website and you can learn about them there as well. So they each have their biographies, so you can find some natural introduction points. You can rehearse this by potentially making this pitch to somebody who isn't an MLA and see how it resonates with them and do they understand what you're trying to accomplish. You also need to be able to keep it brief because they will be moving on to talk to somebody else in short order and there's likely a lineup. And always follow up with a meeting, follow up the meeting with a personal thank you note. This is the most important part. Post engagement, send them an email thanking them for their time and reiterating the conversation and offering an introduction to CPHR. This takes the engagement to the next level. Even letting the team at CPHR know that you met with your MLA and how it went is critical information. Even if they say they don't understand the value of it and the issues that they might take with self-regulation. Those details are super important and we can feed all of that back into our broader strategy. While the pieces of don'ts on the right are quite rare, things do happen, and so we want to talk about them. I trust that many of you will not be threatening or arguing with MLAs. You won't be offering votes in exchange for support. But the one piece that I find can hook people is time wasted on small talk. Of course, you're going to have a few moments of small talk. These are human beings after all, and you want to find that connection. But what I do mean is that you're likely only going to get 10 minutes and you don't want to get stuck talking about fly fishing. I mean, you might love fly fishing, but you don't want to spend the whole time talking about it. So some great pivot statements include, I could talk about fly fishing all day, but I know there's a lineup of people that want to talk to you, and I really wanted to discuss the value of a certified human resource professional that can support your labor workforce strategy goals. You also don't want to talk about political fundraising and don't ask any questions that you couldn't answer yourself. You also don't want to be stretching the truth. You can risk losing credibility, especially where you're specifically naming CPHR. Things you could say could color CPHR. So on the surface, that is the entire presentation in 15 minutes or less. And so I suspect you may have questions. And if you do, I think we have some time left for that.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was awesome. I'm so happy you could join us today to support our members understand more on our efforts towards self-regulation. And I'm just watching the screen to see if any questions are coming in. we do have a few minutes for questions. So please, if you would like to ask. Oh, we have a question. Thank you, Patrick, for asking. Are the slides going to be available to participants? Yes, the question is yes. We're going to include that in our blog.
You bet.
Thank you.
And I did gloss over some elements. So if you're not sure, even on language, I know on alignment, a lot of people have questions about alignment because we don't want to be seen to be twisting ourselves into a pretzel to fit what government is looking for. So I wanted to make sure that it was clear that we aren't looking to help government achieve exactly that. So if you have any questions beyond the word alignment or any language that was used here, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thanks, Melissa. We have another question from Janet. Are there current MLAs that are championing this and a leverage there?
I would say that I don't think we have identified MLA champions to date. I don't think we've gone quite to that level, which is why we're also hoping to draw on the membership here and to feed that information back. There's, MLAs in the sense of some ministers are more supportive than others, where we've had an opportunity to dive deep into the conversation. But as you can imagine, it's more difficult to get on a cabinet minister's agenda than it is with your local MLA. However, the best way to get onto an MLA's agenda is through the constituency. So while CPHR as an organization could reach out to all MLAs, they're more likely to hear from their constituents. Constituents equals voters. If they can keep their voters happy, if they can keep their constituents happy, they can make their way back. So CPHR will also be presenting to MLAs in the fall. No, in the spring, coming up shortly. So we will have an opportunity to hear from them directly, make a presentation, and we'll of course note any feedback that we get there, but members' support to target their own MLAs would be really helpful.
Awesome, thank you. We have another question from Meyer. Can we request advice and support on our outreach to MLAs?
Absolutely. We've been working with the board on their own 30-second pitches, and there are some awesome ones out there. And even in helping to create those pitches, we learn even more opportunities that we can highlight when we're talking to government. So happy to help provide that 30-second pitch. And I think we are developing a template that we'll be able to roll out, and then we can help fine tune. Is that right, Ioana?
That's right. That's what we're working on. And actually, Melissa, the next question that Patrick had was for members who are uncomfortable with developing a pitch. Are we going to share examples? So yes, we are. Stay tuned. And thank you for the question. We'll support, absolutely, we'll support the members.
And just off the top, as folks are thinking about it, one that came up recently that really hammered home where HR is critical was in the transportation sector. And I think it was one of the new board members that shared this. And so he talked about how currently with changes to regulation and training for drivers in the field that he works in, he's continually thinking about the legal impacts, the HR impacts, in his everyday life, and how his certification as a professional human resource comes in useful all the time, and how if that isn't done properly, then you actually can't have people transporting the goods that Albertans rely on every day. And so in a really quick way, just as I did a hack job of his own 30-second pitch, you can see how this would be a critical decision for government, and government's looking for wins. And this seems like one that we can tie into so many of their goals.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. I have another question from Steve Kovacic. What is the best strategy to engage with the opposition party, NDP, and the ruling party, UCP? Is it safe to share the same key message with both parties?
Absolutely. In this case, as a member, the information that you have to share with your local MLA is paramount. You're not, and in both of those cases, you don't want to be saying that the opposition is doing a poor job or that the government MLA is doing a poor job. The goal here is just to have a conversation about the key value of certified professional human resources. And if this was an organization conversation, we typically aren't talking to opposition MLAs during session, just because we don't want to be caught in the middle of any dynamics between the two parties. But in this sense, you are just sharing information about your experience and the value of the request that CPHR has. And so this is a very safe place to play when members are going out to their MLA, whether government or opposition. I would just say key point is to keep it positive, keep it forward focused, and how this is a good thing for everyone and shouldn't be seen as something that is partisan politics at all.
Great. So Melissa, we have a question from Patrick, but I think I should respond to this one. Who do we communicate our activities with CPHR from CPHR Alberta? He's asking if the board chair is the best. So I just want to confirm self-regulation is absolutely a priority for both board and operations, but I think just for ease of response, like keeping the information, please email ceo@cphralberta.ca. We'll follow up with the information in the blog, and we'll include the contact information. We would love to note and to have that awareness when you connected with your MLAs. Thank you. And we have another question. Where can we view a list of Government of Alberta's labor force initiatives? Melissa, do you know that one?
Well, this is the challenge that we are up against. There is not a labor workforce strategy at this point, but I can send over some of the places where we can look to find them over to Ioana, and she can share it on the blog. The places where we're typically looking for, just in general, where we look for alignment through the budget process. The government released their strategic plan. They also released business plans for each ministry. And when ministers are named, they are given mandate letters. And so within each of those mandate letters, there's key goals that they need to find. And there are some elements of workforce in all of them. And so that's how we're trying to pull each of them into this human resource conversation.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. And I think we're getting to the end of the questions, but we're also getting close to noon. We should move into the formal AGM. Please, Patrick, thank you so much for your comment. Great job. Keep sharing our value. We will. And thank you to all the members that are supporting our journey. Thank you so much, Melissa. And on behalf of CPHR Alberta, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. I know.
Thanks, Melissa. And as I mentioned, the presentation and the questions that were answered will be available on the CPHR Alberta's blog in the next couple of weeks. If there are additional questions, please send them through the Q&A box and we will send them to Melissa to be answered.